Well, welcome back to the Dungeon Master's Block, the place where we come to talk about the Dungeon Master, the most important person in the game, the only person capable of playing God, killing characters, and lowering the egos of all their people at the table. I'm one of your hosts, Dungeon Master Mitch.
And I'm DM Neal, aka Joke Maniac.
And real excited because today we have another returning guest with us. We have Greg Tito from Wizard of the Coast back with us today. This is going to be a little bit of a different episode, Neal. We're not going to be specifically talking about a specific topic that can kind of be worked into your homebrew game, but today we're going to be talking with Greg about the rise of D&D, where it's come from and where it currently is, and where, looking ahead, we see it going, which one of the three of us, as we say in the episode, has a lot more insight than two of us does.
Yes.
But I'm excited for that conversation nonetheless.
Yeah, it's an absolutely amazing conversation. Like you said, a little bit different, but I still think really valuable for anyone listening. And speaking of that, if you are a gold dragon or higher on our Patreon, you can head over and find out the amazing content that I've made that has been super difficult to make because I have to base it off of D&D on the rise. So, I don't know. Just go. Find out what I made.
But before you head on over to Patreon for that awesome homebrew content, Neal, we have some 5-star reviews. And our first one comes from Haggard Puppy and is entitled Brand New DM, 5 stars. Never played before, and none of my friends had either. Your podcast helped give me the courage to finally set a date and start a campaign. My friends and I had a blast. We started with a short story called The Death Pit of Moloch. Everyone got into their role-playing roles and had a good time coming up with creative ways to surprise. Luckily, I was able to roll with the punches, and the whole game went smoothly. This podcast, I know, will help me for a very long time to come indeed. Only on episode 9 as of this writing, but I am determined to hear it all. Keep up the good work. Thank you so much, Haggard Puppy. Thank you for that awesome review. Glad that you have started the journey of DMing and started the journey of listening to the show. Episode 9, you've got a ways to go, but I hope to hear from you soon as you continue in both of those paths on both of those journeys.
Yes, thank you. And as with most podcasters, I love that you look at our early episodes more fondly than we do. Okay, I was 100% going to ask that. And our next review comes from Stitcher, and it comes from Chaos and Doom. 5 stars. Fun, goofy, and informative. Great and ridiculous stories, as well as useful information. I listen to this daily and love every second of it. Well, short, sweet, and thank you, Chaos and Doom, and anyone else on Stitcher leaving us a review.
Yeah, thank you so much. And with that, Neal, let's head to the meat.
I'm starving. We ain't had nothing but maggoty bread for 3 stinking days.
Why can't we have some meats?
The plate meat's back on the menu, boys.
So today for the meat, we have a returning guest, a special guest, and it is none other. I cannot say words. I was 3 words away from communications, and I couldn't do it.
Communications.
You were thinking about communications. I think that was the problem.
I'm not going to lie. That's 100% true. But today we have with us Greg Tito, Senior Communications Manager at Wizards of the Coast, host of Dragon Talk, and word on the street is he is a man about town. Greg, thanks for coming back.
No problem. Thanks for having me back on. This is exciting. I don't know if I'm a man about town, but I've definitely been on streets before.
Done. That's all it takes.
Hey, Greg, so it's been a while since you've been on the show, and you work at this little company. I think they're kind of, associated with Dungeons and Dragons, WotC. So what can you tell us about anything that you or WotC are currently working on, as Neal likes to say, that you can talk to us about, of course?
Sure. So the big thing that I'm working on that is, 2 weeks away from this recording is D&D Live 2019, The Descent. It is the follow-up to last year's Stream of Many Eyes, where we brought so many people from the D&D community together to a studio in LA. We had tons of cosplay, amazing Dungeons & Dragons games played, mostly on our Twitch channel. And we're switching it up for D&D Live 2019 by having multiple studios making content the entire weekend long. We will have main stage stuff with some of our, biggest entertainers like Joe Manganiello and Deborah Ann Wall and Matthew Lillard and some other fun people like Marisha Ray from Critical Role, Matthew Mercer, Taliesin Jaffe, folks from the Adventure Zone. I know I could probably keep that list going for too long, but they're amazing. You should check it all out at dnd.wizards.com/D&D Live 2019. It's been a lot of months of planning and getting this all together, but now we're in the final stages and we're burning the midnight candle at all the ends.
Yeah, I don't even know if follow-up is the right word. This seems to truly, like you've done every year, level up this event. Like, I don't know, are we in epic tiers now, would we say?
I don't know, because where do you go from there?
Yeah.
We're God level. Yes, it's true. We keep trying to add more and more stuff to it. I didn't even mention that the fact that, we've been selling badges, so public will be able to be there for all 3 days, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, May 17th, 18th, and 19th, and be able to play in the adventure that we'll be announcing on May 17th in a D&D epic. Have you guys ever played in a D&D epic?
I have not had a chance.
They're amazing. I have actually never played one either, but I'm always really fascinated by the idea of having 20 tables of people in a room playing D&D. They all have their own DMs. They all have their own kind of goals, squad goals at the table, but what they do affects the tables around them and then overall meta goals of everyone in the room playing together. And there's going to be costumes, lights, sound, really making that a premium experience for people. So D&D Epics have been at conventions for the last few years. I mean, obviously it's, it goes back many years in history, but the Adventurers League has done a great job of bringing that format forward. And then this is going to be an even greater evolution for people to play on Saturday and Sunday.
That's just such a cool experience because, of course, when you finish playing, you're going to have all these things to talk about with people at your table. But because of that, ripple effect, you could literally just go to the next table and the next table and just, talk about the things that have happened and, find out how it's affected the other games and their stories. And just a really cool segue to be able to talk to people who love the game and were part of the event just like you were.
Yeah, and there's going to be 3 sessions of it too. So there also will be hopefully folks who experience something completely different that happened in the first session and the third session. And then I'm hoping when everyone's mingling and getting ready for the main stage entertainment stuff that'll be happening in the evenings, that they'll be talking about, oh, what did you guys do? Oh, that happened in your game. Who chose that? You chose that. Oh my gosh, that changed everything. And having those kind of conversations mingling about.
Yeah, and the people that are even running those are awesome names in the community. Additionally, the number of podcasters that are going to be at the event at the same time, it's pure insanity. And Greg, are you ready? For it is time for your surprise question.
Surprise!
Okay. Would you rather play Dungeons & Dragons with a group of authors, a group of actors, a group of musicians, a group of artists, or a group with all of them in it?
All combined.
I'm going to have to say a group with all of them in it, or a player that represented each one of those disciplines, because I think what makes Dungeons & Dragons really exciting is it's the empathy that you have for other people as well as the character that you're putting forward, but it's also to me about this blending of disciplines. Like there is, a typical Dungeons and Dragons game just isn't about writing. It isn't about performance. It isn't about map making. It isn't just about the amazing artwork being shown. It's all of those together, and so having people who have expertise in each one of those disciplines, it would make the perfect D&D party, honestly. I mean, it's very similar to having the rogue and the fighter and the paladin and the wizard all together using their skills to make the experience, successful at the table. And I think that would be really fascinating. I mean, I'd love to even add, I don't think there was artists in that list, but I would love to have visual artists in that list as well to be able to document what we're what happened at the table in an even more amazing way.
My favorite thing is also the idea of adding a mixed group and be like, cool, we can do an actual play. You can do the art, you can do the music, you can.
Right? Exactly. It's like, all right, so we're casting a podcast
Yes.
Already with this, or a stream, whatever works.
Awesome. So that question was from DM Jude. So thank you. And of course, Greg, thanks for that answer.
No problem. Thanks, Jude. Hey, Jude. All right, so I'm not the musician.
This is great because it's the second time we've asked that question to a guest, and both people. Let's keep it going. Let's see how many people we can get with this question.
I love it.
So that leads us straight to our topic. Greg, we kind of bounced ideas back and forth, and we came to the idea that D&D isn't what it once was, and we kind of wanted to talk about just D&D on the rise and where we came from, and who knows where we're going. So I think the question, I don't know if it would be like personal anecdotes of like where we were. Because I can think of what D&D was like for me when I started over 20 years ago, and just the insanity that is D&D in comparison.
For sure, yeah. I mean, I was a kid in the 80s, and I had older brothers, so they were 7, 8, 9 years older than me, and I would go into their rooms and kind of check out what was on their shelves all the time, and obviously they had music that I got into and books. And one of the books was a Dungeon Master's Guide that was just on their shelf. I don't know if they even really had read it or had played it, but it was there, and I was fascinated with it. And I loved the idea of jumping into a fantasy world and having this simulation framework that would allow play for the types of stories that I love, like The Hobbit and things like that. So I read it all, and I wanted to figure out how to play, but I was young. I was 8 or 9 myself when I was reading this stuff, and couldn't really figure out how to get a group together. I think one thing that was hard to parse from the books themselves was what was actual play like. And I remember, I forget what edition exactly it was, but there was a preface in one of the early books that had a 2-page spread that was a script, essentially, of like, this is what the Dungeon Master says, this is what the players said, and they had, there was some banter written into it, and that was the only representation of what a D&D session was like that I could grok a little bit, but it still felt a little bit, how do you say, stilted. Like, it didn't feel like, real to me. Also, I grew up as a Catholic. My mother was very adamant about controlling the kind of media that I consumed. I wasn't allowed to watch MTV. I wasn't allowed to watch The Simpsons, stuff like that. And so when she realized I was paying attention to Dungeons and Dragons, there was also a lot of conversations about like, well, you probably shouldn't be doing that. I even remember being put in front of a video that she got from a priest or someone at her church that was like, here's what's wrong with Dungeons and Dragons. And there was, of course, the midst of the satanic panic all there too. So, to me, that's where Dungeons and Dragons was. I wasn't a part of the vibrant community that was in the Midwest at places like Gen Con and things like that. So I wasn't really seeing the positive nature, and didn't have a lot of, honestly, there weren't a lot of game stores in Connecticut that I went to or was able to go to, probably the more accurate thing when I was that young. So I didn't really kind of get a sense of what everyone was like playing. I just loved it on my own and wanted to kind of explore it. And it wasn't until I was in my 20s and living in New York that I was like, wait a second, I'm the master of my own destiny. I can choose to play Dungeons and Dragons with people, and I'm living in the biggest city in the world, and maybe we can make that happen. And then that was in like the 3.5 era of D&D. So, and it's kind of gone on from there. What about you guys? What was your, the before times of D&D?
So I started in 2nd edition, so I would have been in around like the mid 90s when I started, and I always find it quite humorous because the person that got me into it was actually an ordained pastor. And so, I didn't just, but even in those days, like the way that you approach Dungeons and Dragons is personal. What you add into the game is what you choose to add into the game. So he ran me, and this is super funny, through the Secrets of Saltmarsh, The
no
original,
way.
the original module, he made me an entire party and helped me run to basically say, like, here are all the kinds of characters you could be. Here is how they all work. Which one do you like the most? Then he ran me through a solo campaign, and then I moved into his like actual group after that. I think those were the only people I talked to about Dungeons and Dragons for probably 10 years.
That's crazy.
Like the one group that I got into, because like you said, it wasn't ubiquitous, and also where would I go? How would I find them? What would where would I talk to these people?
Yeah.
Obviously now I figured it out, and there's this podcast. So for me, it was literally, and it was just such a tight knit, basically 10 people that I would talk to until I got into high school.
Yeah, I came to the hobby much later than Neal, that's for sure. I started playing in college. I remember I had friends in high school that played at my lunch table, and I was a geek, but and this is something I regret, but I remember like looking at them and being like, nah, that's too geeky. And since now I have gotten into the hobby, I've run into people that I see that that's their reaction, and I go, dude, I was there, I understand, but listen, just try it. Like, just give it a try. And to me, it's so funny, and I'm sure we'll get more into this, but it's so funny the reputation that Dungeons and Dragons and tabletop role-playing gets, that it's like, oh, like, yeah, people who play that, they have no friends, and they don't know how to socially interact, where it's like, but that's the entire you can't play without friends, and it's all social interaction. But it's funny because I never have talked about this on the podcast before, almost 200 episodes into the podcast, because it's never been something that's been prevalent in this podcast before, when we're talking about, let's look deeper into unicorns, and let's look deeper into world building of this. But this is a conversation that it is prevalent. So, like Neal said, he was brought into the game by an ordained pastor. I myself am an ordained pastor, and when people find this out and find out that I play Dungeons and Dragons, I either get from people who are outside of the church, they get this like, wait, what? You're but I thought I thought pastors and Christians were supposed to hate this stuff. And then I also find a lot of closeted Christians who are like, wait, there's another Christian out there who likes this kind of stuff, that, you're not going to like hate on this kind of stuff. And going into the hobby, I remember there was a lot. Pushback when I even first started, back when I was even just in college, from people who were religious. And I tell you what, now with my job, there are teenagers that I have grown in relationship with, and part of that has been our shared love for tabletop gaming. I have one student in particular that he was real troubled teen, and he's come so far along and grown, and we've built such a close relationship, and part of that has been our love for D&D. I'm ready for any religious person at this point now who wants to say to me that it's evil, and be like, hey, let's sit down, let's have a conversation. I'm ready for you. Let's do this. So it is kind of funny seeing it come from that, but I'm just seeing so much more of a accepting of it, even in communities like we talk about the Satanic Panic, that it was not accepted in to begin with.
Yeah, and I've mentioned this a few times on Dragon Talk, about what it was like for me growing up in that type of environment, and I've had people message me on Facebook who are Catholic priests and saying like, "Hey, no, I don't. This is not. I mean, I've heard your negativity around it, and that's just not my experience. Let me share that a little bit. And there's a Catholic priest who I'm forgetting his name, so I feel bad. But here's my mini of my character, and I've been dungeon mastering for 30 years, and we do it in the church and all this like crazy stuff. Like what? To me that was so. Not my experience.
Different from what you experienced. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it's really heartening. And I think it has to do, and now we'll get into what D&D is like now. I think it just has to do with the general acceptance and understanding of what makes this hobby so amazing for people, and it's hard to pinpoint exactly when that shift happened. I think it was gradual, but I think it really began around the early 2000s with the popularity of the Lord of the Rings and the Harry Potter books and movies. Did a lot to normalize fantasy. I mean, fantasy's been around forever. Everyone has enjoyed it. Dragonlance, being a big property. Bob Salvatore's books being a huge thing that kind of reached into more mainstream kind of areas and bestseller lists and things like that. But it was really those movies, those mass market movies that made fantasy feel like something that you wouldn't be ashamed to talk about. You wouldn't look down at the kids reading Harry Potter books and that type of stuff. And then those kids, who were of child age in the early 2000s, now have their own children and are spreading that love and are having that experience that I had when I was like, oh, I'm an adult now and I can actually, embody some of these roles and I get together with my friends. I think that's a big part of it. I think 5th edition is a big reason why D&D is so popular right now. I mean, I came here at Wizards in 2015, March 2015, which was also oddly enough the same week, if not month, that Critical Role started streaming. Which put a pin in that. I'll get back to that in a second. But the amazing work that the D&D team did to get ready for that 2014 launch of 5th edition can't be understated. I mean, I think everything that is in those core rule books, the starter set, and then obviously beyond, just did a fantastic job of pulling all of the amazing parts of previous editions, as well as focusing on the storytelling aspects and the character aspects, that like fantasy fulfillment part of the game that allowed folks who enjoyed Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings and other fantasy kind of things to be like, oh, I can be like this archetype, and here's the rule set for that archetype, and it's very clearly laid out, and people were able to see themselves. I think the artwork that showed people of color and more women as these heroes on equal footing, not with, any kind of objectionable armor choices or anything like that, allowed more people to be like, I can be these characters and enjoy this time around the table with my friends. And 5th edition is just excellent at that. And then of course streaming. I think the idea, I mentioned that script that was in the early D&D books. That idea, which was sound, is now on everybody's screen, right? People can see what it's like to play Dungeons and Dragons, and more importantly, I think different flavors of Dungeons and Dragons out there that has allowed people to be like, because it's really hard to parse. If you have no familiar with what role playing games are, it's really hard to read the player's handbook and be like, what? How? I get that these are rules and I get some fantasy excitement about this, but how does the game actually work? You don't get that until you start watching, I think, or listening. And the prevalence of Dungeons & Dragons play that is out there in all of these mediums has allowed people not just to learn that, but also to realize that there are different flavors, and that if you go into a game store or you have your first D&D group and it isn't exactly what you expect, 30 years ago, you might have bounced off the hobby. You might have been like, oh, all right, well, it's not for me. But with the idea of streaming out there and having different flavors, people will be like, all right, well, that just wasn't the group that fit the style of play that I like. I'll try again, and I'll try again. And I'll try maybe 3 or 4 times before you finally find the group that works for you. I didn't mention this, but I did play Dungeons and Dragons a couple of times in high school and college, and I had that experience. I kind of bounced off those groups. I never found a consistent group that went through an entire campaign, because it just never really melded with me. Everybody had scheduling problems and blah, blah, blah. So I had that experience where I had to bounce off from playing for 3 or 4 times before I found a group in New York that I latched onto and played with for 2.5 years in the Age of Worms campaign. If someone like myself who had that experience once, they wouldn't play again. And I think streaming allows people to be like, all right, well, let me pick and choose and figure out what works for me. As well as, this is an analogy I've used a couple of times, but to me, streaming is like sports broadcasting. You didn't really learn you didn't really learn the rules or how to play baseball or basketball when you were a kid by reading the basketball handbook, or here's the rules of baseball.
Yeah.
The rules of baseball are really dry. You can't figure out how the game is played. You learn by watching. You learn by listening to the commentary about it. So guys, podcasts like yours is a big part of people learning how to play the game, as well as finding aspirational figures that you want to emulate, like be like Michael Jordan. Well, people want to be like Marisha Ray, like Matthew Mercer, like, Satine Phoenix, like Chris Perkins. They find the figures and like, oh, I want to have that person be my hero and my goal and the people that I want to kind of work towards. So I think streaming allows that for people too.
So there's so much to unpack there.
Right, I know. Yeah, sorry. I get on a
no, it's good. You
coffee.
were on a roll. There was no like wanting to, but there's so much to unpack there. I think if we could kind of go back to like, because I kind of want to unpack what you talked about, but go back a little bit to like the where we were, and I like you brought up the popularity of 5th edition. Now, love it or hate it, like obviously 4th edition was polarizing in a lot of ways. Right. And that was really what it was, is you either loved it or you hated it. And like, I remember like first making the show, like coming from that, I don't like this. And I made it very clear, but like a lot of people wrote into the show and were like, 4th edition was my introduction, and 4th edition, like is what I love about it. And it's like, I've come to realize it's like, you can't really bash any edition, because for somebody that fit, and for somebody that was their gateway into role playing, and it was like, for them, it's going to be always special. But that being said, like 4th edition, there was a lot of like, do I like it? Do I not? 5th edition, like 5th edition seems to have skyrocketed. And I remember in college hearing and seeing all the news about 5th edition and seeing Wizards of the Coast like doing so much playtesting for it. You guys did like a crazy amount of playtesting. 5th edition, which to me as a fan of the game spoke to the fact that you guys at Wizards were trying to get it to be the greatest edition that you could. Yeah. So can you, and maybe here's my first question, and I don't know how much you can speak to about this, but I have heard a lot of like rumors, and maybe they are more than rumors, that there was this thought at Hasbro and Wizards that if 5th edition didn't really get off the ground in the way they were hoping, that D&D was pretty much going to be done. Can you speak to that at all? Is there truth behind that? Is there?
Well, I like I said, I got here after 5th edition was launched, so I don't really know about the before times so much.
The before times,
yeah, right, during 4th edition. I mean, I will. So I can't really speak to that, but I do know that there was, it was a gamble. It was definitely like how do we get the community and the hobby back in a place that is, unified once again. And I think your description of 4th edition as being polarizing is pretty apt. I mean, I'm going to push back a little bit, because I think I was actually kind of in that middle ground. Like I was like, I don't really understand some of these mechanics, but I had groups that I love playing 4th edition with. And I've heard from people that have said, similar to what you mentioned, that like, that was my intro to it. And I loved the kind of tactical flavor of that version of Dungeons and Dragons. And, I always said that a good dungeon master could work with any rule set and make it really exciting. And that was very true. My biggest thing was the disassociation of the mechanics from reality. At first I'm like, oh, that's really cool. But then after playtesting it and having groups, I was like, well, why can't I just use this power that pushes this person and does fire damage? Does it create fire? Like, can I use this in a way to solve a problem that isn't combat related? And the mechanics didn't say one way or the other, and the dungeon master had to be like yes or no, and there was no a fracturing there. As well, just combats lasted forever. There was no way to, once you got to a certain point in the leveling curve, it was like every encounter was 3 hours, and it involved too much for my tastes. Hey, if you do this, I'll be able to do that, and then that player will be able to do this, and it'll have to be the best thing ever. And I'm like, yeah, but why, it's not a very cinematic fight scene if we're negotiating.
Which some people loved, right? Like, right. I know D&D players that would play combat all day. And I know D&D players that would be like, I could play a whole campaign and not ever roll a die in combat. And most, I think, fit somewhere in the middle, but play style is different. But like, so they're obviously, you're coming from that, like, but then 5th edition, like when you talked about the popularity.
So I think, so I'll jump in. Two things. One, 4th edition, super empowered a dungeon master because the math on that stuff was insanely tight. Like you just like, you do this, and this, and it works out. And like, if it is supposed to be hard, it is hard. If it's supposed to be easy, it is easy. And it was amazing. It was amazing in that way that it empowered dungeon masters in a different way than ever before.
I'll just jump in real quick and say it was a lot more fun to design for 4th edition than it was to than I think a lot of people was to play for it. Like I think it was really because it was just a really tight system, and you're like, oh my gosh, I can iterate on so many different ways on this, and it was great. So I agree with you.
Yeah. So for 5th edition, I will say something that I think is true of every edition of Dungeons and Dragons. Mm-hmm. Every edition that has come out has been a labor of love. That's how this hobby works. That's what we do. We're not throwing giant checks in the bank. That's just not how this podcasting thing works. So it is a labor of love. Mm-hmm. I think in the early editions that came across so much more because it was so much more personal. You had the brother cousin scenario. That's how you learned. That's how you learned about the game, was the brother cousin. That kind of thing.
Or sister cousin, depending.
Sister cousin. All the cousins, all the siblings. Like that's just how you learned. And I think it was harder as technology was coming into like the world and like how ubiquitous like my phone is. Like I can play D&D on my phone. I can pull up D&D Beyond, I can pull up dice rollers, and I can do everything like that now. I think 5th edition is the first place where that love is more easy to see. Like the care that was put into the creation, the care that was put into every single aspect, like the art, the story, just literal words on the page. Like this sounds super cheesy, but I've overcommitted, so this is the words I will say. But like 5th edition was like open arms. Like we want everyone that's ever played and everyone that will play to feel like this is the game for them. Like that felt like that was the goal, and that's made it easier for people to adopt it.
And it's encompassed all the different flavors. So I think, the one thing I will say about what I've heard about 4th edition's development, it was, like 5th edition was a gamble. I think 4th was a gamble. They were like, this is the way people will play this game going forward, and it won't be as accommodating to other types of play. And the designers behind that game were pretty adamant about like, no, this is it. We got this feeling, and this is where we're going to go with. And I think 5th edition and the folks that, worked on 4th and are now working on 5th, like, Jeremy Crawford, Mike Merles, and Chris Perkins, they were there for all of 4th edition development too. And they have said time and again that, there would be no 5th edition if 4th edition wasn't there. Like it was a step along the way. And I think what those three and in extension, the rest of the D&D team learned was like, having a specific flavor of Dungeons and Dragons borne out in the mechanics, maybe that wasn't the right call. Maybe if we make it open to however people want to be able to play and give the different types of role players out there more choice and empower them to create the types of games that they want. One that might focus more on story, one that might, allow for really, in-depth tactical, play, and all the different flavors in between. That's going to be the way forward with success. And as you said, the open arms, like basically, and it's something that in my discussions with Jeremy Crawford in the Sage Advice segment on Dragon Talk, it's always been, it's like, follow your bliss, follow the type of game that you want to play. The 5th edition rules are there to support all of those types of play.
I think that's like one of the reasons that D&D and tabletop role playing is on the rise in an incredible way. Is, you mentioned, we got 5th edition, we got, like you mentioned, Greg, streaming and podcasting and all this kind of stuff, but to me, like the fact that it's so accessible, these discussions, and like not only like actual plays in audio or video media, but also like discussions on it. I know for me, from the first time I sat down to do this podcast to now, I have grown a lot in talking to our guests, and like my mindset of what this hobby is has like grown in a huge way. And to me, I see this community for tabletop role playing is exactly what we're saying, is this welcoming. And I feel like it, for some people, it has always been that. but there wasn't always this wave of that, and this is like how it's supposed to be. I remember feeling that dungeon mastering in itself was almost this like closed gate, or this gate that was hard to like, you had to find the right key, and the right key was like knowing all the rules and knowing this and knowing that. And when we first started the podcast, I remember getting lots of emails saying, I'd like to DM, but I'm scared to, or I just don't know like if it's the right fit. And we get a lot less of those emails now. And I'd like to think with our show, it's because we got those emails, we encourage our listeners, like, give it a try. Like, you don't have to know all the rules. Like, that's fine. Like, if there's a player at your table who knows the rules better, cool. Use them as a resource. Like, it's storytelling. Have fun. Be okay with mistakes. And I like to think that that's what I see in the community as well. Like, people like Satine Phoenix, like, just encouraging people to jump in, to tell stories with a group of players, and also just the welcoming atmosphere. I was following this Twitter thread recently that was like, basically, tell us your horror story of the group that you left immediately. And reading through these stories, it was just like, oh man, that's terrifying. Like, why did that happen? Who thought that was okay? But there were also like many stories of like, also like a person in the group doing something that is just not okay. And whether it's racist or sexist or just totally devoid of any caring about the other people at the table, and then a follow-up story of how that behavior was shut down. Right. And I think that's becoming more and more of the norm in tabletop gaming, of this realization of like, this has to be we want to all be having fun together. We want to have a safe place to enjoy a game, and we want it to be welcoming. And that's a good thing, that this is what's being pushed. And I just see that as something that's so prevalent right now in the community. And I have to attribute part of the success to that push in the community.
I agree. I mean, I think it's been something that I latched onto as soon as I got here as well, was like the power of streaming. And I mentioned how Critical Role debuted the same month that I started working here at Dungeons and Dragons. I think there were people even here who were like, is that good? Do we want people to be doing this? And, I got emails for months and years, even after I started, that were like, I want to stream Dungeons and Dragons. Is that okay? Do I need permission from you? And I think there might have been some folks here in the building, from previous generations who were like, "Whoa, no, that's our IP, and they're going to be using our IP, and that, it's gonna." And I think when I got here, I was like, "What are you guys talking about? Like, we want everyone to be playing this game and broadcasting it to as many people as possible. That's the only way that this is going to grow, and to open that up to folks that are not, 30, 40 years ago, what your stereotypical D&D player was. Let's get more women playing. Let's show more women playing. Let's show more people of color playing, because those communities have just as many, if not more, nerdy people who love fantasy than any other community. And so I think the gatekeeping and the shunning, and they're like, oh, if you needed to be a fan since 1982, and if you aren't, and you've never played. Gosh, I'm blanking on the name of the adventure that Tomb of Annihilation was based on. Tomb of Horrors. If you've never played Tomb of Horrors, then you're not in the club.
Fan,
yeah, exactly. And
you haven't experienced the pain of Tomb of Horrors.
But that's right. But that's my favorite mentality of just like, well, I'm not going to hire you because you don't have any experience. I'm like, I can't get any experience though if you don't hire me. Hold on. I mean, I think the biggest push, and like you were saying, Jeremy Crawford, it's find your bliss. But I think the undertone of that also that is prevalent in the community is also not yucking someone's yum. Yeah. Is like, just because you're finding your bliss, that doesn't mean it's someone else's, and just figuring that out. Also, I realized my answer to did you do well or did you win, which is a common question that people ask when they don't know what Dungeons and Dragons is. But I always look back to my players because, as you can imagine, I run the game. And I'm like, did you all have fun? Yes. Then yeah, I won. Like
Yeah,
we all won.
we all won.
That's the only actual goal at this table.
That's that's always my answer when people oh yeah, you had D&D last night. Did you win? And I just go, always, every time.
Every time, because I played D&D.
They all
That's how it
died.
works.
I had more fun. It seemed like they had fun too, but that's the only goal. So I think we can close it out by going around with the final question of where in the world will we go next? I love the idea of just throwing out some pie in the sky stuff of what we think Dungeons and Dragons could be 5-10 years from now. I mean, obviously, Greg has a slightly more in tune perspective than Mitch, right? But
Greg's gonna give two of us will not be giving actual. One of us, you
Perhaps
may want
even
to
three of
listen
us will.
closely.
Yeah.
Perhaps even three of us.
I mean, it's hard to speak to any specifics, but as a fan, I think there is so much possibility for Dungeons and Dragons. I mean, I think one thing that is near and dear to my heart is education and D&D. I think something that I've been trying to foster is, teachers using Dungeons and Dragons, but role-playing games in general to get across concepts like, consuming English literature and getting to it. I mean, I love the idea. I talked to one teacher who created an entire unit that their students played, created characters, went back in time through British literature, and they fought Grendel and went through the wardrobe and Lion the Witch in the Wardrobe and did all wove this entire campaign all in their classroom, and then received rewards that they could then and then if they were acting up in class, they got rewards taken away from them. So it was this great classroom management / content delivery tool that everybody in the classroom was so excited to be a part of because they were playing D&D. They weren't being taught at or lectured to, and I think something like that being formalized into a product or some program to give to teachers is something that I think I would love to see in 5 to 10 years as well. The amazing strides that mental health professionals have had using role-playing games, but D&D specifically to help people who are on the autism spectrum learn about how to get practice social interacting and things like that. I mean, I think role playing is a great framework because it's not them who's out, taking the risk. It's their character, and then having that separation has been really great. And then also allowing for teachable moments with that. I mean, Dr. B and all the folks that take this, as well as Dr. Megan Connell, who are doing all this kind of great work. The Games to Grow Kickstarter that is going on right now is a part of this as well. I think, again, having more formalization and a way to use role-playing games and those things, as well as helping folks deal with PTSD and other mental health issues in general, I think is wonderful, and I think I want to see more of that grow into becoming more ubiquitous in the mental health profession.
Perfect. I mean, two things right off of that is we added a podcast to our network called Dungeons and Dragons, and it's a pair of teachers that use D&D directly in their classroom.
Oh,
and then another friend on the network who just started being a teacher, and that's one of his goals as well. Also, I will forever attribute Bob Salvatore and the Dritz books for the reason my reading level is where it is. I remember picking up that first one and taking weeks to get through it, and now it's just book done. Okay. And
everyone's vocabulary is improved by reading D&D book manuals and novels in general. I learned so many words that I didn't know from those books.
I might stumble over communications, but anytime I want to say Menzel Berenzan, I can do it any day.
Yes, you're
day of the week.
Rattle it right off.
Yep.
Dracarys.
I mean, obviously, I don't work at a company that has all the insights, but I would really hope that within 5 to 10 years, if that's the range we're shooting for, that somewhere in there, I'm sitting down in a theater watching the words Dungeons and Dragons scroll across the screen. And yeah, that would be just a beautiful, beautiful thing. And I'm hoping these whispers one day become a shouting loud exclamation that's out there.
Here's my question to you, because this is something that I've been
Yes, I will
struggling.
absolutely be an extra in it. Yep. Totally.
Done and done. You'll get the arrow in the eye.
Ooh, okay, you said done
death.
and done. All right, Greg, I'm expecting for you to make
Paperwork is in the mail.
Yeah,
A death extra, even better. Go on.
Yes. But here's my question, because I've had that same dream, and I wonder if what is your perfect Dungeons and Dragons piece of entertainment?
Okay,
Is
so
it-
we did
I mean,
a
well,
whole
hold on.
we did a whole episode on this, but yeah.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah,
well,
you should listen to it.
I listened to a bunch of your episodes, but I missed that one. So for me, it's the question of, is it something that's set all in the world,
No.
say Forgotten Realms, or is it something that has the mix of what is pure D&D to me, which is what is happening at the table with the individuals that are there and what they're imagining and the shared storytelling. I think B is a much stronger representation of what D&D is.
I would love to. I think I described it as this way in the episode, is that I described B and I said I would love to see like a bunch of teenagers in a basement and they're telling the story, and I want like a Guardians of the Galaxy feel to like tone wise to this movie. That's what I'd love to see. And I'm just imagining this one scene where like it's dramatic and they're going up against a Baylor demon. And all of a sudden, the Baylor demon says, "Dinner is ready." And you shoot back to the kids and they're like, "Mom, give us 5 minutes. We're almost done this battle." Like, like mixing in like little humor is a huge part of D&D. Even when you play in the most dark campaigns, some of the most dark campaigns that I've run had the most around the table humor because you needed to break that tension. And I would love to see that portrayed on screen. Like you said with streaming, Greg, showing people who don't know the hobby more about what the hobby really looks like. So absolutely that.
Did you guys ever see this video? And it kind of is my go-to for explaining this concept, and it honestly makes me cry. It's like a 5-minute video. I'm a parent. My daughters hold a sentimental value in my heart, so maybe that's why it jerks the tears right out of my eyes. But it's something that was made for Loot Crate, again, almost right when I started D&D. So it was around 2015. They were doing a Dungeons and Dragons box, and to promote it, they made this video. And it's kids showing up to as their kids in the 90s or 80s, and like, oh, new kid, he's gonna play D&D with us, and they he joins the group, and it's a small group. It's only like 2 or 3 characters, and the kids grow up over the course of this 5-minute video. They have like a couple of scenes and be like, oh, and they check in with their lives and where they are, and there's women and men in this, and then I'm tearing up already thinking about it. But the main character's like daughter comes to the table when they're all adults. They all got back together again after 20 years, and she brings snacks to them, and he says, "Oh, do you want to come join us?" And it's this beautiful moment, and I want whatever D&D property that we're talking about doing, it needs to be something like that.
Yeah, there's got to be feels, there's got to be humor, because all these things are huge parts of the hobby. Yeah. And I don't see that being coming to fruition on the big screen or the silver screen or whatever if you don't have people making the movie behind it, actors and director and whatever, who love the hobby, who are in it, because they're the ones who are going to understand and get it. And
luckily we have a whole bunch of Hollywood professionals, writers, directors, editors, costumers, and producers who are just coming forward with their love of Dungeons & Dragons, how they play on a weekly basis. Many of them are going to be at D&D Live 2019, The Descent, and I can't wait to be in that mix again. I mean, something about that event that always maybe I'm just a sap, but it brings a tear to my eye about that too. It's just like these people that you don't, as that kid who read it, I'm going to bring this all back, as that kid who was reading the book by himself and realizing like, oh, this is this beautiful world. I want to be a part of it. And then seeing it realized in the flesh with the lights and the cameras and the costumes and the sounds with these people, all sharing that love together, it really just become as many people said after the Stream of Many Eyes last year, that we had a happiness hangover because everyone was just smiling and laughing and enjoying this love of the game together. And I'm hoping that we get 3 days of headaches of a hangover from D&D Live this year.
If you asked me 5 years ago if I would ever experience Stephen Colbert and Joe Manganiello talking about Dungeons and Dragons on live TV, I would have been like, get
Right.
out of here. And
That's
that happened.
crazy.
And it was
Yeah.
beautiful. And I,
And
as a
Anderson Cooper
fan,
and
I'm sitting there going, oh my gosh. And they're talking about stuff that part of their audience, a big part of their audience is going, what are these words?
Yeah,
and I'm
yeah.
sitting there going, I feel so loved right now.
The fact that he rolled rolled a
20.
d20 and then got a nat 20
Yeah.
was like, this means something.
the hand of God reached down and
I would say, as I'm wearing my Death Saves t-shirt right
Nice.
now,
yes.
I think so. All of that's amazing. So my pie in the sky is that everyone just feels comfortable with D&D, whatever that.
We do. We do right now.
Just like no, but I mean, like so many more people find it. Like there
Yeah.
is no question that this can be exactly what you need it to be. Like you said, education, mental health, just socialization on just a normal level, and finding people that just have a like mind.
But there's only one way that I think that happens, and that's with like everybody listening to the show right now. Like we're all pioneers in that. We all have to make that happen at our home tables. We have to invite people who you think would benefit from this hobby. Greg said like there are like medical professionals now going, there are therapeutic like aspects of this game. So like inviting and like welcoming in and making sure that your table is a safe, fun place to do this. And like, I mean, for me, like if you're out there and you, like me, are part of a community, and I'm talking as a pastor, that
Right.
some people in the community, you know what? Some people you'll never change their minds, but some people you will. So have a conversation.
And
Talk
those,
to them
I
about
mean,
it.
not to be morbid, but those people are, dying off.
Yep.
And the younger generation is there. Sorry, I'm walking and talking, but
You're
the
good,
younger
Greg.
generation is there to build up and get more skills. And I think that's why, guys, your podcast is so amazing. It's because, Dungeon Masters and the, building up of more of them is the limiting factor for the hobby in some ways.
Yeah.
And so inspiring more people to get behind that screen and talk more about, ways to bring their creativity to bear, and converting more players into dungeon masters, and, regular people into players, into dungeon masters, I think is a big part of that. And, by playing, we've heard from people who are playing with different separate generations of folks, from grandparents to parents to young children, and me being able to play with my 5-year-old who, I was the dungeon master at first, and then I was like, oh, well, I'm the one who gets to decide, what you see in here, and blah, blah, blah. Then she's like, I want to do that. I'm like, okay, next session, you be the dungeon master. And she did fantastic, and she made it all up on the fly. She had like a little bit of a plan, but then she was okay with improvising and made it all happen. And I think more that we can encourage that is just going to make that comfortability that Neal's talking about.
So we have another question, the most important question, as I like to refer to it as, hit us with all the links, all the places. Where can people go to find all the things you want them to find?
Well, I mentioned D&D Live. All we want is many people watching to learn about the new storyline. We have been using these events to talk about where the stories will go. We know Waterdeep Dragon Heist and Waterdeep Dungeon of the Mad Mage was announced at the Stream of Many Eyes. This one, we got no other adventure to talk about, so we'll find out all about that at D&D Live, May 17th. That's dnd.wizards.com/DND Live 2019. All the schedule, all the information for that is available there. We'll be broadcasting live starting at 2 p.m. Pacific time on May 17th. And we'll have a special kind of live stream game. I can't talk about that right now, but by the time this airs, you'll probably know why. But that's really exciting. And then at 4 p.m., we'll be unveiling the new adventure on that Friday the 17th. And then we'll have tons of content from so many streamers and amazing creators all weekend long. Tune in. It'll be on twitch.tv/DND, as well as our YouTube channel, Facebook Live, Twitter, Steam. Did I say YouTube? YouTube as well. We're trying to broadcast to as many different channels as possible. So whatever is your favorite streaming platform of choice or video on demand platform of choice, it will all be there. And we want as many people watching as possible. Honestly, the more people watching, that will, ensure that this D&D thing, takes off. So do that. And then, of course, I'm at Greg Tito on Twitter, but you don't have to worry about me.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Greg, again for
so
coming
much.
on and talking to us about where D&D is, where it is, where it was, where it is, and where it might go.
Nice. And then now you guys got to have me back on and we'll just talk about dungeon mastering. Because
Yes,
we'll do
I
it.
love listening to your podcast and finding I get
thanks.
inspired and want to just keep jumping in and playing more sessions than I already am. But I appreciate what you guys are doing.
Well, you will hear Greg Tito back on the Dungeon Masters block then sometime in the near future.
Nice. Thanks, guys.
But they have been asking for their mail on a daily basis. It's all they're talking about up there.
That
Dolly.
right there is the mail. Now let's talk about the mail. Can we talk about the mail, please, Mac? I'm dying to talk about the mail with you all day, okay?
Welcome to another segment of the Mailbag of Holding, where we take stories, ideas, and questions from you, the listener. And today we have one from DM Jason, and it's an interesting one. I like it. They basically took a picture that they had found on the internet to use as inspiration in their game. And they did not meticulously review the picture, as I know myself would not. And surprise, surprise, one of the players picked something out that they would not have necessarily wanted. So it was an image of kind of a forest clearing, and there was a tarp in there. And so one player saw the tarp, immediately calls it out, and in the mind of DM Jason, it's like story, game, ruined. But then they thought to themselves, you know what? Wait a minute. And basically from DM's block and DM Nastics of like, yes, and think on your feet, took what they had and twisted it. So they basically twisted their timeline. And now not only is the evil cult of Odin, because it is set in the real world, summoning forth this powerful devil, but now the lines between like present and past are crossing. So that's why the tarp was there.
I love it. So, I mean, this is just a great example. It's a different example, but a great example of DM Jason improving, right? Like being on his feet in the middle of a game. I definitely use a lot of images for inspiration of my games, but I've kind of personally moved away from showing images at the table. I think possibly just because I don't have like an iPad that would make it really easy to like throw those images up. But in this case, Jason showed an image, and instead of going probably what I would have done and been like, guys, give me a break. I found it on the internet. I didn't realize the tarp was there. Move on, pretend it's not there, which he could have very well done. Instead, he rolled with it.
Yep.
And I love that, because what DM hasn't, the longer that you DM, the more times your players are going to be throwing you curveballs or things that you get online or from other places that you're like, oh, this is perfect for a game. Little things that you miss are going to throw you curveballs. So as a DM, are you going to just roll with it? Are you going to go with it? Are you going to improv and improve that improv skill? That's a great, great story about DM Jason doing just that.
I agree, because I 100% thought that is not the route. I love do as we say, not as we do, apparently,
yes.
Because both Mitch and I would have been like, get out of here with that tarp idea. Yeah. And so,
because I can see my player too, like having a big smile on their face while they point out something wrong. Yep.
And so, if anything, thank you, DM Jason, for putting it back on us to be better about the things that we tell in the podcast. We just want to thank Greg again for coming on and diving into that conversation about D&D on the rise. Like I said, a lot of really interesting, useful information, and the most knowledgeable person in the room. So thank you, Greg. And if you want to email us and tell us about how D&D might be on the rise for you, you can always head over to dungeonmasterblock@gmail.com. And of course, if you see fit and you want to leave us a 5-star review, you can always do it on iTunes, Stitcher, or your podcaster of choice. And hopefully we can find it and read it on air.
You can follow us on Twitter at DMS_block. That's at DMsBlock. And you can like our Facebook page. If you'd like to keep up with the show, get updates about episodes coming out, get updates about Patreon content being thrown out there, those are the places that you want to go for all of that goodness. We have a Patreon member shout out of the week, and this week's Patreon member shout out goes to Brandon Lee. Thank you so much, Brandon Lee. Brandon is a silver dragon.
Yes.
We are just so supportive of the support that all of our dragons give to us. Man, Neal, to have a show with all these dragons behind us, we're pretty powerful. We're pretty powerful. And to have Brandon, a silver dragon, join those ranks means everything to us. Brandon, we hope that you are enjoying all the rewards on the Patreon. But thank you so much for your support.
Yes, thank you very much. And as always, the Dungeon Masters Block is a proud member of the Block Party Podcast Network, where you can check out other shows like the GM Showcase, Dungeons and Dragons and Daughters, Detentions and Dragons, and more. And we just want to thank you again for listening to the Dungeon Masters Block, the place where we come to focus on the Dungeon Master, the most important person in the game, the only person capable of playing God,
Killing characters,
and lowering the ego of all of the people at the table. I'm DM Neal. Good night and good luck.
and I'm Dungeon Master Mitch, reminding you to always keep on dungeon mastering.
It's not inspiration, it's not wisdom, and it's bad advice.
You should steal your players' character sheets and change numbers and see if they notice. Would you rather play Dungeons and Dragons with a group of authors, script writers, playwrights? Oh, I see what happened. I'm going to read it again. Okay. This is the joy.
This is going in the outtakes.
Yeah, this is the joy of other people writing things, and then I don't realize.
Oh man, the amount of times we have to change questions around or reviews around, and we're just like, wait, what? Or they'll do a typo, and we're like, that word makes no sense there. What are they trying to say? I don't understand.
Yep.
Okay.
Is it?
I got it. I'm ready. And the phone is ringing.
Go for it.
This is Neal.
So at this point,
Hey.
Neal is on the phone.
Yeah.
Interrupting
Give me a quick minute
our
and I'll
current
hang up.
episode.
Okay. Yep.
And he's laughing while he's on the phone, but I'm still recording, so I'm just going to keep on
Well, I was also still recording. But
Goodbye.